Greetings all, Dr. X here. Good to see ya. All right, so in today's lecture, I'm going to talk a little bit about a dissertation outline that I'm making available for you. So if you'd like, I've put in the description below a link that you can follow, fill in your information, and get a copy of my dissertation outline sent to you. You can do that right now so that you can follow along with it, or after the video, feel free to click and get a copy of this dissertation outline for yourself. All right, let's get started. Okay, so let me talk about what I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about front matter, about chapter 1, which is your introductory chapter, chapter 2, which I'm referring to as your literature review chapter, chapter 3, which is all about your research methods. Chapter 4 is for qualitative research studies. I like deep and rich descriptions of the participants. So I have my students work on a chapter that's just about the participant information, but if you and your chair decide that it's not necessary to have that in a separate chapter, then all of the information I'll cover in chapter 4 will be found in what I'm calling chapter 5, which is the findings chapter. Chapter 6 is implications and recommendations, and then you'll have back matter. That's all that's contained in the dissertation outline that I'll talk with you about in this video. So let's get started with front matter. Now, the front matter may be institutionally specific. In other words, your graduate school, your department may have guidelines they can provide you with that outline exactly what should be contained inside of your front matter. But here are some of the things that you'll find fall in this area of your dissertation. Okay, your front matter should have your cover page, that'll be a cover page, a signature page, the dedication section, acknowledgments, your CV, your vita information, which should be condensed down into maybe 2 or 3 pages, a list of tables that you have contained inside of your dissertation, a list of figures, your table of content for your dissertation, and an abstract. So this is all the information that should be contained in your front matter. However, again, you want to check with your graduate school for their guidelines to ensure you have all of the correct information entered. Next up is the introductory chapter. Now, this chapter really does introduce people, whoever your readers are, to the content that's contained in your dissertation. It provides a summary of key ideas and points that guide your dissertation development. So here is what should be contained in your chapter 1, introduction. So in the introductory chapter, there is a chapter introduction, and that will be a chapter introduction, I would say, for every one of your chapters in your dissertation. But your introduction should have a chapter introduction, a background of the study, statement of the problem, need for the study, purpose of the study, rationale for the study, significance of the study, your research questions. For those of you that are doing a qualitative dissertation, you'll also include delimitations, and your chair may also have you include your limitations there. Research reflections, key terms, and a chapter summary. So that's what's contained in chapter 1, your introductory chapter. Okay, so then in chapter 2, we're looking for a literature review. Now, it's not just a review of one piece of literature. It really is an understanding of all the literature, or it should contain a thick background for your literature for your study, what research is already out there. And I like to use the funnel approach with my doctoral students as far as the way in which that dissertation looks. So there's broad general information. It becomes more specific to your field of study, more specific down to the literature that supports why you chose the research questions you did and the research you'll be doing. You and your dissertation chair will need to sit down and talk specifically about the content of your literature review. All the literature reviews vary from person to person, but again, if you follow that funnel approach from general down to specific, that should help you identify the things you'll need to include in your chapter 2. But again, you and your dissertation chair should really make decisions about what that is. Now, chapter 3 is my personal favorite chapter in dissertations. It is the part of the dissertation where you talk about your research methods. You talk about research questions, you talk about the methods you'll be using to gather your data. So here's what is contained in chapter 3 of your dissertation. Again, you should have a chapter introduction. You should include information about your research design, your research questions, the population you've selected for this research study, data collection procedures, data analysis procedures, ethical considerations, and chapter summary. So this section includes everything about your research design and the methods that you'll be using during your research study. Now, I really appreciate chapter 3 because it really does give me a sense of who you're going to be as a researcher. And remember, the whole point of pulling a dissertation together really is to demonstrate that you have the ability to conduct research, to analyze data, and to write it up in such a way that your colleagues can learn from what you did during your study. So chapter 3, really important chapter as far as I'm concerned. Now on to chapter 4. I like my qualitative dissertation students to include a chapter that's specifically about their participants. Now, they don't have to. If they'd rather, and it's better for anonymity of their participants, they can absolutely combine the participant descriptions into the findings chapter. That's not a problem at all. But if they've done in-depth interviewing, for example, with 8 to 12 people, I really want to understand those people more. It just gives an opportunity for more of the participant voices to be heard. So I always like to include a chapter 4, a description of the participants. This chapter would have an introduction, again, thick and rich descriptions about the participants, descriptions that still allow for their anonymity, that still protect the participants, but at least gives me some background of who those participants are, right? And then a summary in the chapter. So again, check with your dissertation chair to see whether or not you need a whole chapter 4, or if it's better for the anonymity of your participants to just include descriptions of them in your findings chapter. Speaking of findings, chapter 5 is the findings chapter. Now here's what you can expect to include in chapter number 5. Now again, if you combine the participant descriptions into this chapter and the findings chapter, this will be chapter 4, but for the purposes of the outline, I'm giving you this is chapter 5. Here's what you will include in the findings chapter: a chapter introduction, the description of the participants, any identified themes that you came up with in your data analysis, the findings from your identified themes and your data analysis, as well as a chapter summary. Now again, check with your dissertation chair to see what else they'd like in chapter 5. For my doc students, that's what you can expect that you'll write up in chapter number 5. Now, we're on to chapter 6. Chapter 6 is implications and recommendations chapter. And there's a lot that you'll be including in chapter number 6. Here's what I'd like you to include: a chapter introduction, summary of your findings, again, reminding your readers of what your findings were that you discussed in the previous chapter. Any discussion points that you want to make should go in this chapter. You're also going to include a section with the implications of your study. Going back to chapter 1, remember the significance of your study. These implications will feed into that significance, right? So what are some of those implications? What were the limitations of your study? Now, your dissertation chair may also want a section in chapter 1 that includes limitations after you talk about delimitations, but you definitely want to talk about what limitations you saw during your research here in chapter number 6. This chapter will also include recommendations for future research and then your conclusions. You'll write a solid conclusion for this chapter. And that is it for all of the written chapters and front matter. That only leaves one section left, and that is back matter for your dissertation. Now, this is all the stuff that's included, the appendices, all the stuff that's included at the end. So here's what you're going to include in back matter. Your back matter should include references, and it should be in the style format for your discipline. So if you are writing, for example, if you're writing in education, in my department in education, you would do it in APA format. But I know in English departments, for example, they'll use MLA. Just write your references in whatever format your department or your field calls for. You'll also include appendices, a copy of your approved IRB form. Any kind of research materials that you use, like interview questions, those should be included, observation protocol sheets, focus group observations, just everything that you need in order for people to see what you did in your study, just in case they would like to replicate it. Okay, and that is it for the chapters of your dissertation, from front matter to back matter. Now, if you have questions about the outline that I have for you, go ahead and drop those in the comments below. If there's something that you think that I've missed as part of the chapters and you have a question about it, go ahead and leave that in the comments below. Again, if you'd like a copy of the dissertation outlines, there is a link below. Go ahead and fill that out. Also, I want to let you know that I have a new newsletter that I'll be putting out. It's called the Doctoral Scholar. And so if you are working on your dissertation, you know other students that might benefit from information, some tips and strategies that I'll be sending out via email, please feel free to sign up below, or you can send them to the link as well so that they can sign up. Okay, that's it for this lecture. In future videos, I'll take some time to go into more detail, especially about the literature review, how to write a literature review, and maybe a little bit more on the methods chapter. Hey, thanks so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate your engaging with the content here on this channel. If you'd like, go ahead and click the thumbs up and leave me a comment below. I always love engaging with other people in higher education. Thanks so much for watching, and have a terrific day.